guys, and welcome to Aesthetic Chat with Kiki. I'm your host, Kiana Gamble, and this is yet another episode of the podcast. I'm so excited for you guys to listen to this episode today. I have Haley Wood on. She has been injecting over 16 years now. She is the owner of The Look Facial Aesthetics in Tennessee, and I think you all are just really going to enjoy this episode with her. So, enjoy! I'm so excited to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time to record with me today. I know you're so busy.
Well, thank you for asking me to do it. So I'm happy to.
Yeah. So sorry again about the time difference. I keep forgetting that you're 2 hours ahead from me.
That's okay. I've been getting into a lot of that lately with some Zoom calls for trainings and stuff like that. So I just always have to confirm to make sure it's the right time.
Right. Okay, well, let's get started then. So I want to start out by just talking about your journey, your story into the aesthetic industry, and just kind of where your career has gone since you transitioned just from nursing into aesthetics.
Yeah. Well, I first started out as a trauma ICU nurse at University of Kentucky, and it was a level 1 trauma. Scared to death, worked nights, and did that for about a year, and then moved to Nashville and worked in the post-anesthesia care unit, which it was all level 1 trauma center, but the level of acuity wasn't as intense. It's just, it's super hard as a new nurse you learn a lot in ICU, but it's just emotionally and just, it's a lot. And so I really did that to see if I wanted to go into nursing, to be a CRNA or to go to nurse practitioner school. And then I decided that I would just go to nurse practitioner school at Vanderbilt. And so I got my women's health nurse practitioner degree from Vanderbilt, and I worked in gynecologic oncology. And that was great. So it wasn't as intense, but it was super sad to an extent. And I had my son, and then we moved back to Kentucky. And I thought, it was really hard to find a good job in the small town because it was really a male-dominated town with a lot of physician's assistants. So I did I worked in the pre-anesthesia area, and I enjoyed it, but I just felt like it wasn't what I wanted. And I saw this job open up in Lexington, Kentucky at a med spa for a nurse practitioner. I thought, okay, it was 2 hours away from where I was living, but it was where I was from and my parents still lived there. So I thought, I'm just going to apply and see what happens. So I remember and this was almost 16 years ago. So I went to apply, went for the interview, and there was a waterfall in there. There was makeup, there was mirrors. I'm like, who would not want this? This is such a dream job, but I didn't know anything about it. And at the time, it was just Botox and Cosmoderm and Cosmoplast. So I don't even think I think we had Restylane, but I don't think we had Juvederm then. I know we didn't. So they hired me, and I took my son. He was still in pull-ups at the time, and we moved from Western Kentucky, and we moved to Central Kentucky to Lexington so I could do this job. And so for about a year, maybe a year and a half, we commuted on the weekends back to my husband so he could see my son. So we did that for a year just so I could learn the med spa, and because I loved it so much, I just fell in love with it. So yeah, that was about 16 years ago. So I went from trauma to PACU to nurse practitioner, and then in gynoc, and then into aesthetics. And I think there's just something about aesthetics that I'm not an adrenaline junkie. So my prior nursing experience was good, but it just wasn't something I had to have. And I really enjoyed making a difference in women's lives, but in a different way than gynecologic oncology. And I don't think I ever saw myself focusing my career on Botox, but it just worked. And the money was good. And I felt like I had found a career that I could be independent, financially independent with. And it just, I don't know, I loved all aspects of aesthetics. I like the business, the marketing. I like the technical, the clinical side. It was all so enjoyable to me. So after about a year of doing that in Lexington, we moved back to Nashville because I felt like I needed to be with a plastic surgeon because I knew like the Botox, I knew how to do the simple fillers, but I didn't know facial anatomy and I didn't know anything about plastic surgery. And I felt like I really needed that, that foundation of plastic to be better. And so I found a plastic surgeon. This was in the middle of the recession, mind you. So on a good week, when I first started there, I would see maybe 11 patients on a good week. So it was so hard to start the practice because I had a really good practice in Lexington, and then starting all over again in Nashville was super tough in the recession. But we worked through it, and I started. Literally when I worked with the plastic surgeon, I answered the phones. I did marketing. We started an email campaign. I helped him in the OR. He taught me to suture and sew. And that's really where I think I understood what facial volumization and how you could change someone's face shape and things while watching him do fat grafting with a cannula. So that gave me such an appreciation for the anatomy, brow position, eyelids, all of that. That just really sealed the deal for me so I could be a better injector with filler. So I did that for about 8 years and managed their non-surgical practice. And really what happened after that is that he was hiring some physicians to join his practice. And I was just really worried as to where my future would be from a business standpoint. So I just went out on my own. And the plastic surgeon I worked with, Dr. Moore, he honestly was the best teacher, the best foundation I could have had. And he is now my medical director. So I left on great terms. He fully supports me today. And I wish so many more nurse practitioners could have the relationship I have with our medical director, who's a plastic surgeon, because he's so supportive of what we do. So it's been really good. So I opened my practice 4 years ago. We have 9 staff and we're on our 3rd expansion. So it's been a roller coaster. Yeah, it's been a roller coaster.
Awesome. Yeah. So in terms of where you are now, are nurse practitioners not able to own their own practices? Just because over here in Washington, if you do have your nurse practitioner, you don't have to have a medical director necessarily.
Yeah, that's what's so tough with aesthetics because every state is so different. So in Tennessee, I can own my medical practice as an NP, but Dr. Moore has to be my collaborating physician. So it's a little different in Tennessee too. So if I dispense narcotics, he has to sign 100% of my charts. But if he doesn't, he signs 20%. So he comes on site. He sees patients 4 hours a month for surgical consultations in my office, and he signs 20% of our charts. So we play by the books. I always want to do things the right way and not just guess or ask a friend what the rules are. Like we've hired attorneys, and we know exactly what the rules are in Tennessee, and we always, we abide by those, and we have a compliance officer. So it's all the things you learn along the way. I just never had wanted to do it halfway. I've wanted to make sure we were always above boards on the business side of things, on everything we do. So yes, right. I can own my practice, but he has to sign off on charts.
Gotcha. So I wanted to kind of touch back on what we were talking about, starting out for about a year when you were had gone and left basically your family almost to go and pursue whatever aesthetics may be. And you said that you had like a pretty steady clientele. And then you left that practice for another practice. And at that point, you were seeing like 11 patients a week. How long did it take you to really get a full schedule again? Just because, even starting out now, I feel like I never really expected to have to go through a lull. I don't know. I never really thought of the logistics once I got into the industry, but it definitely takes time to build your clientele and get people to refer you and, really get busy.
Yeah. And I think that's something, it took me about 3 years, to be honest with you. And that was in the recession. So now we're in an aesthetic boom. But even with Courtney, our nurse practitioner we have in the practice, she's busy. But it comes in waves. And I think it takes a while to establish that loyal clientele, the ones that even if you drop their brow, they're coming back. They're not going to go to the next practice. So this business is so much about relationships that if you can establish a relationship with a patient and get to know them, I think you're going to have one for life. Like I've had patients for over 14 years now. And if I accidentally, drop their brow or we got their lip a little off, they're going to come back because they know I'll make it right. So I think it takes a while because you're only seeing patients, if you're doing Botox 3 or 4 times a year, you try to get them into the office for other things that you're doing, but you only touch point with them just a couple of times a year. So that relationship is critical, and staying engaged with them on social media, which I hate social media, but it's just, it's what we have to do. But I do think it takes about 3 years, and that's a lot of study. That's the business side of things. That's learning how to engage with patients. And it's just that, like, learning how to inject well and get great results. So yeah, I think it's 3 years before you can really say, I've got to, how well is my practice? What's my retention like, and how often, I guess I should say 3 years till how steady your practice is going to be.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that makes me feel better too, because Melissa is always telling me, just be patient. It does take time, and just to know that, it's not going to happen within the first year, maybe, or even the second, but like 3 years of, really gaining that trust. And it's good to know that you have clients that have been with you for so long, and that, yes, hey, maybe you do drop their brow, but they're willing to come back and,
Yeah. I'd say 3 years, and you do have to have patience. And I think this industry is so sexy, and you think, oh, I can make such good money and I'm going to come out making, over $100,000 the first year. And that is often not the case. I mean, it depends on if you get into a practice who's willing to train you and be a mentor to you. If you're out on your own, that's super hard to learn. Are they willing to market? Like, what is all that behind the scenes that will help promote you? You just can't. It's hard to do it on your own. I say find a faithful, friend, and find a faithful hand, someone who's going to help you navigate that. Because even as much as I've worked with Courtney, it's still going to take her 3 years probably to find a solid, stable practice and clientele.
Well, that is great advice. That makes me feel a lot better. I know that you train kind of all over the country. I know you on the palette resources. But I wanted to just kind of touch on, like, when you're training people, what type of injector, whether that's new or experienced, like, that stands out to you?
Yeah. So, I think the new injectors they both do. So let me explain why. The new one stands out because you're empowering someone with a new skill set that they've never learned. They've never known how to do this. And they're like, oh my gosh, I just injected Botox for the first time. Like, I love seeing that on a new injector. I love guiding their hand. I love just that simple, fundamental education of anatomy. And okay, we're going to knock out 20 units tonight in the glabella so that you go back to your practice and you can do it 5 times over and make money. Like, I love that freshness of that new injector. But I also like the experienced ones because there's so much to share. Someone who may be in the field for 10 years, they may be in the field for 10 years, but they only see 20 patients a month. That's so different than someone who sees a patient or 20 patients a day. So I like seeing the experienced injector to see where they are, how many patients they're seeing a day, how many syringes of filler are they doing, how many units of Botox, and really try to dig into what they're doing to see where we can make improvements. And then also, at that point with someone's experience, you're also talking about the business side. And I think the business side is really what's been motivating me the last 4 years. Because, we've had new fillers and we've got, new indications and all that stuff. But the business side continues to change and evolve, which is interesting. And that's where I guess an experienced injector is fun for me at this point.
Would you say that you had said that the business side of injecting and aesthetics has really kept you in the industry? You don't really have any formal business training. Has this all been learn as you go, or do you have really great mentors? Or
100%. No, I mean, it's 100% learn as you go, because how many business courses did we take in nursing school? I mean, none,
Nothing,
none.
nothing from a business
So,
or, and I'm like, I should have been taking like marketing classes and all the things that, I don't know, I was very
yes.
focused on science and things that aren't really business related, but
No, and I didn't even take a business course in high school.
me either.
So I didn't know the difference between gross and net until I got into aesthetics, because when we were first paid, we were paid on commission, and like, well, you're going to get so much of the net. I'm like, I have no idea what net means. So, I mean, I've gone from ground zero to now. I mean, we're really strong practice. But you just have to figure out what your weakness is and then find people to help you along the way. Like mine, definitely, I cannot do bookkeeping. I cannot do accounting. So we have some really strong players helping us with that. Yeah, but marketing, the first med spa I worked for, she was an amazing marketing person. So I learned a lot on how to bring people into this space with giveaways and things like that to promote. And then I think I learned the technical fundamental anatomy from Dr. Moore and email campaign. Back in the day, we did monthly specials. And then I realized monthly specials just helps. Well, it doesn't help anything. It actually creates a clientele who's always looking for the next best deal. So after about a year of that, I'm like, this really isn't working. And we're creating a clientele that's always based around the dollar. So I just kind of learned as I went on the marketing side, the compliance and business side of things. I have a business coach, and she's truly helped me with creating a culture in our office that is strong and good. And then helping me navigate where I need help, like hiring a branding company and hiring a website company, all the things you can't do, but hiring that out and making sure you're hiring it out well. So, yeah, I mean, you just learn as you go. And finding people that do know so that you can ask the silly, stupid questions like, what's the difference between this and that? And they'll help you navigate that. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So in terms of you being a trainer, what kind of questions do you love to hear at trainings? Is there like a specific type of person that, at the training will stand out? Is it like maybe a natural ability or I don't know, eagerness to learn? Just because, I mean, we're all trying to take trainings and we all would love to stand out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think that, I don't train anymore for Allergan or Galvaderma just because I got so much burnout with it. So I train now for Revance and for Palette because it's new and it's fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the ones that, that's such a good question. The ones who probably come, like we do the Palette ones on Zoom or on, not FaceTime, but I guess it is Zoom. And the ones that I can see their names pop up time after time, I know that they're taking the time out of their day to better their skill set. And so those are the ones that always stand out and shine to me. Then the ones that reach out to me they DM me on certain questions. I can tell that there is such a need for education and like good education in aesthetics. I feel like that is where hopefully the next 10 years will improve to where there's just no formal education. And I think for nurses to be seen as a professional provider in aesthetics, I think we're going to have formal education set up. I mean, I was taught through Jill Jones's company, AAI, and I'll never forget cracking my first, Botox vial. But I have tried twice to get aesthetics into formal education, like at the graduate level, and it is so, so hard. I don't know why it has to be this hard, but in order for, I think, aesthetics to be seen as a true specialty in nursing, we're going to have formal education. And I don't know where that starts. I've tried with Union University. I've tried with Vanderbilt University, both in Tennessee, and it just doesn't seem to get anywhere. So that's where I hope in the next 10 years we can make some strides in aesthetic nursing.
If you don't mind me asking, what kind of barriers are you seeing with trying to get this into, formal education? Just because I totally agree. Most people, well, with social media now, people know about the industry, but there's no, like you said, formal education or a way to get into it, or really a safe way to kind of go about it without finding a really good mentor.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like people will ask me all the time, who do I go to for training? And I can give you the good trainers that are out there doing it, but there's so many like pop-ups and so many like Instagram classes that I'm afraid that nurses are getting the wrong education. And
Right.
the biggest barrier is finding a dean of nursing at a university level who is probably getting Botox herself. And I hate to be that blunt about it, but I don't think anyone at the collegiate level, like a dean of nursing or someone who's a professor, really feels like this is a legit area of nursing, even though nurses own aesthetics. And this is what we are doing. And I think we know the numbers that nurses are injecting more than the physicians are. There's at the university level, they don't see it as a true specialty. And until we find someone at a university level who believes in what we're doing and sees the impact of what we're doing and how it's changing nursing lives, I don't think we're going to be able to ever get it, because the curriculum's easy. That part's done. Having the models done and doing the live labs, that's easy. That can be done in a heartbeat. It's trying to figure out, one, how to charge for it. Is it an elective course? All of that, like they just don't know how to wrap their heads around it. So that's been my biggest barrier, is trying to get the deans to understand how to implement an aesthetic nursing supplement or an elective into their already full course regimen that they've got set out for nurses. So my thought was to have just like an elective or like a postgraduate certificate, possibly, that a nurse practitioner could sit for and take. It could be a lot of online courses for the didactics. And then we have a 1 or 2 times a year, we do a lab where we do on-site injections. So it's pretty simple. Someone just has to adopt it. And I think if someone does, it would be huge, because every NP or RN would take it in the country who wanted to get into aesthetics.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that there's a lot of need for it. Like you said, this business is booming, and so many people are trying to get into the industry, that at least have them get into the industry in a safe way.
Exactly. And I think that's why there is such a disconnect between physicians. I think this has been going on since I've been in aesthetics. There are some physicians who just won't accept nurses or nurse practitioners or physician's assistants as injectors. I mean, look at the state of Alabama. They will not allow NPs, RNs, or PAs to inject Botox. It's ridiculous, but it's a money thing. And so until there is formal education to say, okay, here's their curriculum, here's how they're educated, and here's how they're trained, I don't think we're ever going to be taken seriously. Now, there are some physicians like Charles Boyd, John Moore, who totally support nurses, and they've supported me along the way. Keith Marcus, Glenn Valcios. There's some amazing physicians. Most of them are plastics usually, that say, yes, you guys are legitimate. You guys are so good at what you do, and you bring value to the specialty. But we meet so much resistance. I mean, even in industry, they won't have physicians and nurses in the same meting together,
Really?
the same advisory board, and it's ridiculous.
Oh my goodness! Like, collaboration, people, come on.
But I think that's one of the biggest barriers we have in our industry, is being seen professional. And I will say that when we as aesthetic nurses do not brand ourselves as professionals, and we're, and our social media portrays us as sexy or anything less than professional, educated nurses and providers, it gives even the public an idea that we're not, I don't know what the word I should say, but I just feel like we don't do our profession justice when we are a lot of the social media that we're seeing, like TikToks and videos on how to check out or how patients are checking out, or I don't know, like I kind of get, I don't know. This is one of those sore spots for me that I hate to see our profession be subjected to how we are portraying ourselves on social media, and how so many followers and injectors and patients follow the popular ones. And there's no depth behind what they're doing. They're not showing their before and afters. They're more comedians, or they want to be public figures more so than professional, educated providers. So that's probably the hardest part I see in our field. And it's going to be our biggest challenge, is keeping aesthetics professional and staying away from the sexy side of it.
I agree. And even with my conversation with Lovely on episode 2, we touched on this a little bit too. And you and her have been in the industry so long that it just doesn't seem like it took you guys so long to get kind of where you are and to make a name for yourself and make a name for nurses, and for it to kind of regress it's really disheartening.
Yes. It's 100%. That's such a good way to say it. It's just so disheartening I guess it happens in every industry, but we worked our way through word of mouth, and now the number one marketing tool is Instagram. I just wish it would be used in a professional way that highlights how extremely smart we are in this industry, and doesn't play us up as little sex kittens.
Right.
I mean, I remember watching I think it was a live Instagram, and it was 2 people that I know, and there were sex toys involved. And I thought, what in the world is going on? Like, and why are people subscribing to thinking this is good? Like, I cannot understand it. So those things are so frustrating and disheartening to me, that we've worked so hard, like Jill Jones and Don Cirillo, Jerry Obie, Kevin Harrington. These guys and girls work so hard to get us where we are, and we can't let it be sensationalized.
Right. So you did touch on this a little bit. You said you used to train for some of the drug companies, and you kind of switched gears now just because you were experiencing some burnout. I really didn't grasp the fact that burnout was so high in aesthetics. I know burnout is fairly high in nursing and in healthcare in general, but in terms of burnout for aesthetics, have you experienced that? Kind of how have you combated that, if you have experienced that? And I mean, what has like kept you here,
Yeah, well, I experienced burnout when I was training so much. And so I was working 3 days a week in plastic surgery, and then training or traveling every week somewhere. And I think that everyone aspires to be a trainer, which it is such an honor to be a trainer. There's no doubt about it. But if you're a good trainer, you keep getting requested to go all over the country. And, most of us are moms, or, have families. And so it takes you away from your family, but there's a high, you get from saying, oh, they want me in California. Oh, they want me in Washington. So there's a high, and you feed off of that. But really what happens, for me, is that I fed off of that. And I love training. I love teaching. I loved what I was doing, but I just didn't set boundaries in place, and I allowed it to burn out. I allowed it to burn me out on my passion. And so I remember so many times I was just wish if this elevator would just get stuck for 3 or 4 hours, I would be so happy. Or if I remember being on a plane trip to Denver, and I was crying my eyes out, where I just had enough. Because you get up at 4:00 in the morning, go to the airport, get to Denver by 8 or 8:30, you do a training, probably do two trainings in the morning, do a pallet that night, and it's just go, go, go. And you're always on. You're giving so much of yourself to everyone else. And that's where the burnout happens. You just can't do it all. You might be able to do it all for a little while, maybe 2 or 3 years, but there will come a point where it's just total burnout if you don't set boundaries. So I think I wish what I had done back then is say, okay, I'm only going to do, 6 or 7 trainings a month. And after that, it's going to be pushed out to the next month. That way there's some type of a balance between, managing and now, I'm owning I own a practice, so I just can't be gone. And if I want my practice to thrive, I can't be away from it. And I just had to accept that, yes, is there a fear of missing out? Absolutely. Like there's a big Allergan meeting this last weekend and I didn't go, but I actually sat home, was like, I'm glad I'm not going. So it takes a while to get past that fear of missing out and learning how to say no. And if you don't learn how to say no, you're going to have burnout. So now in this season of my life where my son's a senior in high school and I'm owning a practice and building a practice, those are the most important to me. So I think you have to sit down and ask yourself, where's your joy? Where do you find your joy? And how do you want to show up when you go to these? Like when you show up at work, do you want to show up tired because you just got in from a plane at 11:30 at night? Or do you want to show up for your patients and for your staff? And so I just chose to let the things that don't bring me as much joy go away and only do the things that I enjoy. But I still have boundaries in place where I don't do more than 4 trainings or 5 trainings a month. And that's kind of been my sweet spot with it.
Awesome. Well, that was really, really great advice. So I really want to thank you again for taking the time to come onto the podcast. You have really great little pearls of wisdom, and I think that my listeners are really going to enjoy this episode with you. In terms of where my listeners can find you, find your practice, what's the best way to get a hold of you, DM you, where would that be?
Yeah, so I think Instagram is my easiest platform. It's Haleywood_NP. And then our practice website is The Look Facial Aesthetics. So our practice one is The Look Facial Aesthetics, and then my personal is Haleywood_NP.
Perfect. Well, I will tell my listeners to head your way. And again, thank you so much, Haley, for being on the podcast.
Yeah, and kudos to you for doing what you're doing. It's exciting.
Again, huge thank you to Haley for coming on the podcast. I hope you all enjoyed kind of what we chatted about today in regards to the industry, where it's going, her story, all of it. Remember to stay up to date on podcast stuff. Follow the podcast Instagram, which is at aesthetic.chatwithkiki. And my personal aesthetic page is at aestheticnurse.kiki. And you can find the podcast streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can also stream directly through my website, aestheticnursekiki.com. All right, beauties, have a great day. Bye.